What's up, guys? Welcome back to Inside Out Precision. I wanted to do a bow review today, but our chronograph has been on the fritz. It's giving me crazy speeds. Like, I'll shoot the same arrow 3 times and I'll get like 109, 225, 370. So I can't trust anything it's telling me. So we have a new one ordered, but it has not showed up yet, and I'm actually taking off tonight to drive down to California to do some duck hunting and see some family. So basically I'm coming up with something that I've been getting a lot of questions on recently, and that is how does a second and third axis benefit me? And that's on your sight, so a second and third axis on your sight. So I'm going to kind of go over what the different axes are on a sight, and how they can benefit you, and basically why you need to set them. And then the second thing is going to be talking F.O.C on arrows. There's a ton of different opinions surrounding that subject, so I'm going to kind of go over mine, what I've played with, what I've seen, and yeah, just take it for what it's worth. Like I said, what I'm saying is not absolute. This is just what I've seen. But starting with the axes on a sight. So not every sight is going to have adjustable axes, and when I say axes, what I mean is the ability to adjust all these levels so that they're all flush with my bow. This particular sight, this is the Montana Black Gold Mountain Lite. This is the 3-pin version. This sight has a first, second, and third axis adjustment. So the first axis is going to literally be my sight rail right here. This is what, when I run this sight up and down on this rail, see how that moves up and down? If that is not flush and perfectly level with my bow, as my sight travels up and down, it's going to move from right to left or left to right. So as I shoot at further distances, you might think your bow is out of tune because you keep hitting further and further left, but it's actually just that first axis on your sight. Now, not all sights have an adjustable first axis. For example, the Spot Hog, like Fast Eddie's, they have a second axis and a third axis, but no adjustable first axis. Now, they seem to be machined pretty darn well to where, when I get my second axis on, they travel straight up and down. But you need to get, if you have an adjustable one, the first thing to do is get your bow in a vise, get a level on it, whether it's a string level or even using a 4-foot level between your limbs, and matching, putting a secondary level on your first axis here and matching the level of your bow to the level of that. Once you get that level, then you're going to match the bubble in your sight actually to the bubble on this on the sight bar. So we're matching, the angle essentially of our sight housing level here to the level on the first axis. Now, the second axis again is really important because if I'm, slightly canting my bow, I'm going to shoot as I go down in yardage on my pins. Again, those pins are going to be at a slight angle, and I'm going to shoot consistently right or left the further I move out. Now, the third axis is one that I see so many people, either their shops just don't know what it is or how to set it up, or they are doing it incorrectly. And I am going to try to make a video on how to do this. I don't have all the equipment here at home. I need the shop. But essentially, the third axis is how this sight is going to sit like flush to my bow. So if you're looking at the bow like this, from the top, that sight shouldn't be cocked one way or the other. It needs to be level with your bow. And why this is important is because, I'm going to set this down for a sec. Let's say, again, the top view from the bow. Here's my bow, here's my sight. If it's perfectly level, no matter if I'm on flat ground or aiming up or downhill, it will always show me level. But if it's tilted like this, when I'm on flat ground, my bow is perfectly vertical, it doesn't really matter. It will show me level. But as soon as I tilt my bow, again, if it's cocked like this, flat, and I tilt my bow uphill, now you're gonna have a high side and you're gonna false cant your bow. So a lot of people shoot like really well, their sight's really good on flat ground, and then they go out to a 3D shoot, and on, some downhill shots they're right, other uphill shots they're left, like consistently. And they think it's either something they're doing or, their bow is out of tune, and it actually has nothing to do with the tune. It all has to do with the sight. I get a lot of people that send me messages saying, hey, my bow is shooting bullet holes through paper, but I'm I'm consistently left at 40 yards, and my first question is always like, well, are your axes leveled? And a lot of times they don't even know. If you're gonna do this at home, you need a bow vise, a string level, and I like the Hamskea third axis leveling tool. I don't have one here because I just use the one at the shop. I could try to explain it, but it's probably gonna confuse you more than it would if you just go to their website, order it, and read the instructions on it. It's a really cool little device, and really helps with leveling your third axis. Again, I think a lot of shops don't know how to do it correctly, and if you don't do it right, it's almost better, or it's almost worse than just not doing it at all. So if you're gonna spend the money on a site like this, where $250 to $400 sites, to me, you're not gonna get the full potential out of the site if you don't take time to level those first, second, and third axes. So they are really important. It can be really frustrating when you feel like you're making good shots and you're just constantly impacting right or left at different distances, uphill, downhill, side hill, all that. So that covers the axes. Now, F.O.C. There's still a huge trend in extremely high F.O.C. And when I say extremely high, I mean anywhere from 20 to 28%. If you're not familiar with what F.O.C. is, that is the front of center weight, meaning the percentage of the weight that's in behind the balance point of the arrow. So now most arrows that I've built that group really well at distance and still hit hard end up somewhere in the 12 to 14% F.O.C. Now, obviously, I've read all of Dr. Ashby's stuff. I understand it, but most of his stuff is coming out of recurve bows, shooting stuff at 20 yards in Africa out of a ground blind or a water hole or something. Now, I understand having obviously more mass weight translates to more momentum and better penetration in an animal. But what I've noticed is that really high F.O.C. arrows, they will tune fine as long as you have a stiff enough spine on your arrow. But when that arrow loses velocity past, at a certain distance, once it drops below a certain velocity, your groups just absolutely blow up. When there's that much front weight on an arrow, once it doesn't have enough basically velocity moving forward, that front of the arrow just starts tanking and nosediving, and the back of your arrow does all crazy stuff following it. I've played with different spines and different point weights and all that stuff, and played with a bunch, and yeah, at high F.O.C. arrows, 20 to 35, 40 yards, they shoot really well. But then when I get out to 50 or 60, and I know people are going to say, oh, you shouldn't be shooting 60 yards anyway with a bow, but whatever, we do it. I'm lethal at it. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Go pick up a rifle, whatever. But I want to be able to be lethal out to 60, 70 yards, and I am. And what I've noticed is that those groups start to really explode and balloon up out past that 45, 50 yard mark with a really high F.O.C. arrow. Now, if you want more penetration, if you want to shoot a heavier arrow, just go with an overall heavier mass weight. That mass weight, that total weight of the arrow, is what's going to carry that arrow, through an animal. I'm not a light arrow proponent by any means. On this setup, I'm shooting those injection 280s with 155 grains up front. It's right at 13.6% F.O.C. And I didn't build it to that F.O.C. I just played around with the length and point weight till I got what grouped best, and that's where it ended up. But they weigh 516 grains. So that's a heavy arrow. It's still shooting 280 feet a second out of this bow. And it hits hard. But if you had a 27-inch draw length, I would not tell you to shoot a 517 grain arrow. I would tell you to shoot a 465 grain arrow, because or even a 445 grain arrow. Because you're going to get a little more speed with it. It's going to keep your kinetic energy up, and it's still going to have plenty of hitting power. Just a heavier overall arrow, if you want to go with more weight, in my opinion, is better than just loading up your point weight with 225 grains on a 28-inch shaft. I understand you can get them to spine out with these lightweight, thick spined arrows these days or heavy spined arrows, but they just, to me, they just don't group as well. You know, I always like a point weight somewhere in the range of that like 135 to probably 175 seems to be really good for most people. And that's just what I've come across, is that in terms of flight characteristics, you know, once you start getting into that 20% FOC mark, you need that heavy arrow to you know, be a band-aid for a poorly placed shot, because they're harder, they're not as forgiving, in my opinion, on target. So that's my take on F.O.C. I'm sorry if your head's spinning a little bit after that. If you're not familiar with what F.O.C is, there's a ton of literature about it online, and there's some really good stuff on there. But you know, when you listen to these pros and talk to these pros, yeah, nobody's shooting that. Like, you sacrifice accuracy for just penetration, and to me, that's not a trade-off that I want. I want to be able to hit what I'm aiming at, and when it hits, I'm gonna have plenty of speed and plenty of momentum to carry that arrow right through any animal in North America. You know, obviously if I'm going after Cape buffalo or like an elephant hunt or something like that, yeah, you need a 1,000 grain arrow. But for an elk, anything between like 450 and 550 grains is more than enough weight. And anything between 10 and, you know, 16% FOC is more than enough FOC. It'll be well balanced. You'll have plenty of mass weight to carry that momentum when it hits, and you'll still be really accurate. So that's my take on it. I'm sure the comment section will blow up with this one, but like I said, I have read all of Dr. Ashby's stuff. I have watched Ranch Fairy. I know what they're saying. That's just not my experience. So anyway, say what you will about it. Comment in that section below. Hit me up on Instagram if you have any questions regarding this. I'll try to do my best to answer it. Things can get pretty in-depth with arrows. And again, you can ask 10 different people and get 10 different opinions on it. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a good conversation to have. And you know, maybe you'll learn a thing or two, and maybe pick up a few more 10 rings, or you know, hit a few more double lungs or whatever. So thanks for watching today. Remember, precision is a decision. Keep them in the middle, and I'll see you on the range.